What happens when the punchline you deliver in front of everyone becomes the joke that destroys your reputation? How can one bold wedding night humiliation turn a perfect life into a public disaster, ending with a cold packet of legal papers the very next morning? I learned exactly how far a man will go when he's had enough of being your punchline. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched Miles's face drain of all color. The entire reception hall had fallen silent after my toast, 200 guests staring at us with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed amusement. I had just told everyone about Theo. "Ladies and gentlemen," I had announced with what I thought was charming boldness, "they say honesty is the foundation of marriage. So let me be honest. My wonderful husband Miles here has been so patient with my complicated heart. Even when my old flame Theo here tonight reminded me what passion feels like." The words had seemed so empowering in my head, so modern and enlightened. I was Evadne Chessel, 34 years old, successful event planner who believed in transparency and emotional growth. I thought I was being revolutionary, showing everyone that marriage could survive truth. Instead, I watched my husband of exactly 4 hours slowly remove his wedding ring and let it drop onto the marble floor of the Meridian restaurant's private dining room. The metallic clink echoed through the silence like a gunshot. Miles didn't say a word. He simply stood up from the head table, his 37-year-old frame rigid with a dignity I had apparently just shattered, and walked toward the exit. His brother Oliver jumped up to follow him, shooting me a look of pure disgust. "Miles, wait," I called out, but he didn't turn around. The guests began murmuring, phones appearing as people started recording what would undoubtedly become the most talked-about wedding disaster of the year. My mother, Livia, rushed to my side, her face flushed with what I hoped was supportive outrage. "Darling, you were just being honest," she whispered urgently. "He's overreacting. This is what modern love looks like." But I could see Miles's mother Margaret across the room, tears streaming down her 64-year-old face as her friends comforted her. His father stood beside her, stone-faced and silent. Theo appeared at my elbow, his creative director charm intact despite the chaos. "Well, that was certainly dramatic," he said with an amused smile. "You always did know how to make an entrance, Evadne." I stared at the ring still lying on the floor. A server had started to approach it, then backed away, unsure of the protocol for cleaning up a marriage that had just imploded in real time. "This isn't how it was supposed to go," I muttered. "What did you expect?" my father Alan asked quietly, appearing beside us. At 65, he had the tired wisdom of a man who had watched his daughter make questionable decisions for decades. "You just announced your affair at your own wedding reception." "It wasn't an affair," I snapped. "It was emotional growth. Miles and I talked about this. We agreed that honesty was important." "Did you agree that humiliating him in front of everyone was important too?" Alan's voice was steady but disappointed. The reception continued around us in awkward fragments. Some guests were leaving, others clustering in groups to whisper about what they had just witnessed. The band had stopped playing entirely, unsure whether to continue with the celebration. My best friend Simone approached cautiously. "Evie, honey, maybe we should get you some air." I looked around the room one more time. The beautiful reception I had planned for months, the perfect lighting, the elegant centerpieces, the carefully curated guest list, had become a crime scene of social destruction. "He'll come back," I said, more to convince myself than anyone else. "Once he calms down, he'll realize I was just trying to be authentic." But even as I said it, I could see Oliver helping Miles into a car outside through the restaurant's tall windows. My husband was leaving our wedding reception, and somehow I had become the villain of my own love story. The ring remained on the floor, abandoned and glinting under the chandeliers, as the first chapter of my marriage ended before it had truly begun. I woke up alone in our king-sized bed, still wearing my wedding dress from the night before. The apartment felt eerily quiet. No sound of Miles making his usual morning coffee, no gentle humming from the shower, just silence and the lingering scent of my expensive perfume mixed with champagne and regret. My phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. 57 text messages, 34 missed calls, and hundreds of social media notifications. I scrolled through them with growing dread. "Girl, what happened last night?" From my college roommate. "Saw the videos. Are you okay?" From a work colleague. "Call me Asa P." From my mother. Videos, plural. I opened Instagram with shaking hands and found multiple posts from wedding guests, each showing different angles of my toast and Miles dropping the ring. The hashtags were already forming. Wedding fail, chapter drama alert, modern love. I needed to control this narrative immediately. I spent the next 2 hours crafting what I thought was the perfect social media response. Last night was a celebration of radical honesty and evolved love. Not everyone is ready for relationships that transcend traditional boundaries, but growth requires courage. Grateful for a partner who challenges me to be authentic. Growth mindset. Authentic love. Modern marriage. Within minutes, the comments started pouring in. Some supportive, many confused, others openly critical. "This is just cheating with fancy words," wrote Miles's cousin. "Authentic, you humiliated your husband on your wedding day," added someone I didn't recognize. But there were supporters too. My mother commented with fire emojis and, "So proud of my brave daughter." Theo liked the post and added a comment. "Truth-telling takes courage. Not everyone can handle authentic connection." I deleted the negative comments and blocked the worst offenders. This was about controlling the story, about making sure people understood that I was the progressive one, the emotionally mature one. My phone rang. "Miles." "Thank God," I breathed, answering immediately. "Miles, I'm so glad you're—" "I'm at Oliver's." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I need space to think." "About what?" "Miles, I was just being honest. Isn't that what we always said we wanted? Complete transparency." A long pause. "Evadne, you told 200 people about your affair with Theo. At our wedding. While he was sitting right there." "It wasn't an affair," I said quickly. "We had coffee a few times. We talked about art and life. It was emotional connection, not physical betrayal." "You kissed him." My stomach dropped. "How did you—" "Margaret saw you. Last Tuesday at the gallery opening. She didn't want to tell me before the wedding, but after last night—" His voice trailed off. I closed my eyes, remembering that moment. It had felt so spontaneous, so alive. Theo had been explaining a painting to me, standing close, and when he turned to look at me, the kiss just happened. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. "Miles, that was nothing. It was just a moment of what? Authenticity?" The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You're being dramatic," I said, falling back on my usual defense. "One kiss doesn't define anything. I chose you. I married you." After humiliating me in front of everyone I care about, I was trying to show them that our love is strong enough to handle truth. Another long silence. Then, "I'll be back tomorrow to get some things. We need to talk about how we're going to handle this." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone, then at my wedding dress crumpled around me. This wasn't going according to plan. Miles was supposed to recognize my emotional courage, my commitment to authentic living. Instead, he was acting like a victim. I opened my laptop and began researching articles about evolved relationships, polyamory, and emotional honesty in marriage. I needed ammunition for our conversation tomorrow. I needed to make him understand that I was trying to elevate us above conventional limitations. By afternoon, I had crafted several more social media posts, each one more philosophical than the last. True love isn't about possession or control. It's about supporting each other's complete emotional experience. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones most threatened by your growth. Vulnerability is a gift. Not everyone is ready to receive it. Simone called around 3 p.m. "Evie, honey, I think you should take a break from posting," she said carefully. "People are starting to talk." "Let them talk," I replied. "I'm not going to hide from small-minded people who can't handle emotional evolution." But some of the comments are getting really harsh, and I heard from Jessica that Miles's family is pretty upset. Of course they are. They're traditional. They think marriage is about pretending to be perfect instead of doing the real work of growth. Maybe just consider that Miles might be hurt. I mean, regardless of your intentions, finding out about Theo at your wedding reception was probably pretty shocking for him. I felt a flash of irritation. Whose side are you on here? I'm on your side, always. I just think maybe there's a way to fix this without making it bigger than it needs to be. But I wasn't interested in making it smaller. I was interested in making people understand that I was pioneering a new kind of relationship, one based on radical honesty instead of comfortable lies. That evening, I drove to Theo's loft in the Arts District. He answered the door with paint-stained fingers and that knowing smile that had gotten me into this situation in the first place. "The bride returns," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "How's married life treating you?" "It's complicated," I admitted, looking around his space. Everything about Theo's world felt alive and creative and free, such a contrast to the careful, controlled environment Miles and I had built together. "I saw your posts," Theo said, handing me a glass of wine. "Very philosophical. Very you. Miles doesn't understand what I was trying to do." "Miles is a finance manager," Theo said with a slight shrug. "Numbers and spreadsheets. Not exactly built for emotional complexity." I nodded, feeling validated. This was exactly what I needed to hear. "You know," Theo continued, settling onto his paint-splattered couch, "last night was probably the most honest wedding toast I've ever heard. Most people spend their whole lives pretending their relationships are perfect." "Exactly," I said, sitting beside him. "I was trying to show everyone that real love can handle real truth." "The question is," Theo said, his eyes meeting mine, "what are you going to do now?" I didn't have an answer, but sitting in his loft, surrounded by canvases and creativity and possibility, I felt like maybe I didn't need one. Maybe the answer would reveal itself as I continued to live authentically, regardless of who was ready to understand. My phone buzzed with another text from Miles. "Coming by tomorrow at 2 p.m. We need to discuss next steps." I showed Theo the message. "Sounds ominous," he said. "Sounds like an ultimatum," I replied. But I wasn't worried. I had truth on my side, and truth always won in the end. At least that's what I told myself as I drove home to our empty apartment, already planning what I would say to make Miles understand that our marriage could be stronger than ever if he could just embrace the same emotional courage I had shown. I had no idea that while I was crafting my narrative of enlightened love, Miles was crafting something else entirely. Monday morning hit me like a sledgehammer wrapped in whispers. I walked into Peterson Events, the boutique wedding planning firm where I had worked for 6 years, expecting the usual Monday morning chaos. Instead, I found an office full of people who suddenly became very busy with their computers the moment I appeared. "Morning, everyone," I called out with forced cheerfulness. A chorus of mumbled responses followed me to my desk. I could feel eyes tracking my movement, conversation stopping and starting again in hushed tones. My assistant, Jennifer, approached my desk with what looked like a carefully practiced neutral expression. "Evadne, Sandra wants to see you when you have a moment," she said quietly. "Sandra Peterson, the company owner. This couldn't be good." "Did she say what about?" Jennifer glanced around nervously. I think maybe some clients saw the videos from Saturday night." My stomach clenched. "What videos?" "The ones from your reception. They're kind of everywhere." I pulled up Instagram on my phone and searched for my name. What I found made my blood run cold. The videos from my wedding had been shared, reshared, and turned into memes. Someone had even created a compilation video titled Most Awkward Wedding Toast Ever that had over 50,000 views. The comments were brutal. Imagine finding out about your wife's affair at your own wedding. That poor man's face when she mentioned the other guy. This is what happens when narcissists get married. The audacity is actually impressive. I marched into Sandra's office without knocking. "We need to talk about damage control," I said before she could speak. Sandra, an elegant woman in her 50s, who had built her business on discretion and class, looked at me with something between disappointment and disbelief. "Evadne, sit down. If this is about the videos, I can explain. People are taking everything out of context. I was trying to demonstrate evolved relationship dynamics and—" "Stop." Sandra's voice was firm. "Just stop talking for a moment." I sat down, my hands clenched in my lap. "I've had 7 phone calls since yesterday," Sandra continued. 7 different clients asking if you're still going to be planning their weddings. 3 of them have already requested different planners. That's ridiculous. My personal life has nothing to do with my professional capabilities. Your personal life just became a viral video about wedding disasters, Evadne. Our clients hire us because they trust us to create perfect, memorable celebrations. They don't want to be associated with, she gestured vaguely, whatever that was on Saturday night. What that was, I said, standing up, was honesty. It was authentic communication. It was everything that's wrong with the wedding industry, this obsession with fake perfection instead of real human connection. Sandra stared at me for a long moment. "Take the week off," she said finally. "Let things cool down. We'll reassess next Monday." "Are you suspending me?" "I'm giving you time to figure out how you want to handle the situation before it gets worse." I left Sandra's office feeling like the walls were closing in. The entire office was watching as I gathered my things, their expressions ranging from pity to barely concealed judgment. In the elevator, I called my mother. "Darling, how are you holding up?" Livia's voice was warm but strained. "Work is being completely unreasonable. They're acting like I committed some kind of crime instead of just being honest about my feelings." "Well, your father and I have been getting some interesting phone calls." "What kind of phone calls?" "Margaret called. She's very upset. She said some things about you that I won't repeat, but she made it clear that she blames you entirely for what happened." "Of course she does. She's never liked me. She thinks Miles should have married some submissive little housewife who would never challenge him to grow." "Evadne," my mother's voice carried a warning tone I rarely heard. "Maybe you should consider that people aren't upset because they're small-minded. Maybe they're upset because what you did was hurtful." "You two." I couldn't believe it. "You were proud of me Saturday night. You said I was brave." "I said that because I love you and I was trying to support you, but I've had time to think, and honey, announcing your feelings for another man at your wedding reception wasn't brave. It was cruel." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own mother was turning against me. "I have to go," I said, hanging up before she could respond. By the time I got home, I was furious. Everyone was missing the point. Everyone was too caught up in conventional thinking to see what I had actually accomplished. I had shown them all what authentic love looked like, and they were punishing me for it. I opened my laptop and began typing a blog post. "When Truth Becomes Terrorism, How Society Punishes Authentic Women." I wrote for 2 hours, pouring out my frustration with people's inability to understand emotional evolution. I wrote about the patriarchal expectations that demanded women hide their true feelings to protect male egos. I wrote about the courage it took to live authentically in a world that preferred comfortable lies. I was just about to publish it when my phone rang. Miles. "I'm downstairs," he said. "Can you buzz me up?" My heart raced. This was it. This was when we would finally have the conversation that would fix everything. Miles appeared at our door, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, but his eyes were clear and determined in a way I had never seen before. We need to talk, he said, walking past me into our living room. Yes, we do, I agreed, following him. Miles, I'm so glad you're here. I've been thinking about everything, and I realize that people just aren't ready for the kind of relationship we could have. The kind of honest, evolved partnership that... I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from an explosion. What? I want a divorce, Evadne. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You can't be serious. Miles, it's been 3 days. You're just hurt and embarrassed, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can... You humiliated me in front of everyone I care about, he said quietly. You announced your affair with another man at our wedding reception while he was sitting right there watching. You turned what should have been the best day of our lives into a public spectacle. It wasn't an affair. You've been seeing him for months, Evadne. Coffee dates, gallery openings, long text conversations that you hid from me. You kissed him. What would you call it? Emotional exploration, I said desperately. Personal growth. An expansion of my capacity for connection. Miles stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Do you hear yourself? He asked. Do you have any idea how insane you sound? I sound insane because I refuse to live within the narrow confines of traditional relationship structures. I sound insane because I believe love should be honest instead of possessive. You sound insane because you're using therapy speak to justify cheating on your husband and then humiliating him in public. I felt tears starting to form. This wasn't going the way it was supposed to go. Miles, please, we can fix this. We can build something better than what we had before. Something more honest and real and... There is no we anymore, he said, pulling a manila envelope from his jacket. These are temporary separation papers. I'll be staying at Oliver's until we can work out the details. He set the envelope on our coffee table like it was a bomb. You're making a mistake, I said, my voice shaking. You're letting your ego destroy something that could be beautiful. My ego? For the first time, I heard real anger in his voice. Evadne, you stood up in front of 200 people and told them about your feelings for another man. At our wedding, while wearing the dress I helped you pick out, holding the flowers I helped you choose, in the venue we planned together for 8 months. And you think this is about my ego? I think this is about your inability to handle authentic emotion. Miles looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something die in his eyes. Something that had been there for the 3 years we had been together. Something warm and hopeful and loving. Goodbye, Evadne, he said, walking toward the door. Miles, wait. But he was already gone, leaving me alone with the separation papers and the crushing realization that my authentic truth might have cost me everything I actually cared about. I picked up my phone and called Theo. The husband finally showed up, he asked. He wants a divorce. Well, Theo said after a pause, I guess that means you're free to explore those authentic connections you've been talking about. But as I looked around our empty apartment, our carefully chosen furniture, our wedding photos still displayed on the mantel, our shared life scattered in pieces, freedom felt a lot like falling. 2 weeks passed in a blur of unanswered texts, avoided phone calls, and increasingly desperate social media posts. I had thrown myself into what I called my authenticity campaign, posting daily about emotional courage, evolved relationships, and the price of living truth in a world built on lies. The response was mixed at best. I gained some followers who appreciated my brave honesty, but I lost friends, family members, and professional contacts at an alarming rate. Even Simone had stopped liking my posts. I was spending more time at Theo's loft, finding comfort in his artistic chaos and his validation of my choices. He had a way of making everything seem like performance art, like my life was just an elaborate creative project rather than a catastrophic implosion. You're becoming quite famous, he said one Thursday evening, showing me his phone. Someone had created a TikTok account called Wedding Toast Lady that was posting updates about my situation. Look, you've got your own hashtag, Inchas Authentic Evadne. I scrolled through the posts. Most of them were mocking, but some were supportive. A few women had posted about their own struggles with honesty in relationships, thanking me for showing them it was possible to speak their truth. "See," I said, feeling vindicated, "I'm helping people." "You're definitely making an impact," Theo agreed, though something in his tone suggested he found the whole thing more amusing than inspiring. That night, I returned to the apartment to find something that made my blood freeze. On our kitchen counter was a manila folder, thick with papers and photographs, with a note on top in Miles's careful handwriting. "Evadne, please review these materials before our meeting with the lawyers on Monday. M." With shaking hands, I opened the folder. The first item was a printout of every text message I had exchanged with Theo over the past 4 months. Somehow, Miles had gotten access to my phone records. Reading them in sequence, I could see how the conversation had evolved, from casual friendship to flirtation to something much more intimate. Thinking about our conversation today, "You make me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible." Me to Theo, 3 months ago. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Miles is working late again, so we'll have plenty of time to talk." Me to Theo, 6 weeks ago. "Last night was perfect. I know we said it was just a kiss, but it felt like so much more." Me to Theo, 2 weeks before the wedding. Seeing my own words printed out in black and white, stripped of context and emotion, they looked damning. They looked like exactly what Miles had accused them of being, evidence of an affair. The next section contained photographs, pictures of me and Theo at the gallery opening, his hand on my back, pictures of us at a coffee shop, leaning close together across a small table, pictures of me leaving his loft building on 3 different occasions. Margaret had been busy, or maybe Oliver, or maybe Miles himself had been following me. The final section was the most devastating. Bank statements showing charges at restaurants where I had met Theo, receipts from the boutique where I had bought new clothes for our dates, credit card records showing purchases of lingerie and perfume in the weeks leading up to the wedding. At the bottom of the folder was my wedding ring, the one Miles had dropped on the reception floor. Attached to it was a jewelry store receipt marked "Return, Refund Processed." I sank into a kitchen chair, overwhelmed by the weight of evidence. This wasn't just hurt feelings or wounded pride. This was a methodical, comprehensive case being built against me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Oliver. Miles asked me to let you know that he's moved out permanently. Don't try to contact him directly. All communication should go through the lawyers from now on." I called Miles immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times with the same result. Then I called Theo. "They have everything," I said when he answered. "Photos, texts, bank records, everything." "Who has everything?" "Miles, his family. They've been documenting my relationship with you for months." There was a pause. "Well, that's thorough. Theo, this is serious. They're building a case. This could destroy me." "Evadne, you're being dramatic. So what if they have some photos and text messages? You're getting divorced anyway. What's the worst that could happen?" But I was starting to understand what the worst could be. Miles wasn't just hurt. He was strategic. He was building something, and I had no idea how far he was willing to take it. I spent the weekend trying to reach anyone who might be able to help me understand what was happening. My father wouldn't take my calls. My mother answered, but said she thought it was best if I handled the situation quietly and with dignity. Simone finally responded to my texts, but only to say that she thought I should maybe take a step back from social media for a while. Even my co-workers at Peterson events had stopped responding to my messages. I was being systematically isolated, cut off from every support system I had built over the years. On Sunday night, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I found something that made my stomach drop. Someone had created a Facebook group called Evadne Chessel Wedding Drama with over 3,000 members. They were sharing the videos from my reception, analyzing my social media posts, and speculating about what would happen next. Worse, people were posting photos and information about my personal life, my work address, my parents' names, even details about my college years that someone must have dug up from old social media posts. I was becoming a cautionary tale, a viral villain in a story I no longer controlled. Monday morning arrived with a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Chessel, this is Rebecca Martinez from Channel 7 News. We're doing a story about social media and modern relationships, and we'd love to get your perspective on... I hung up immediately. 2 more reporters called within the hour. At noon, I received a formal letter from a law firm I had never heard of. Hartwell, Stone and Associates, family law specialists. The letter was brief and terrifying. Dear Ms. Chessel, we represent Miles Chessel in the matter of your marriage dissolution. Please be advised that our client is seeking full asset recovery, spousal support denial, and public conduct restrictions as part of the divorce proceedings. We have substantial documentation supporting our client's position that the marriage was terminated due to your infidelity and public misconduct. Please have your legal representation contact our office immediately to schedule mediation. Failure to respond within 72 hours will result in default proceedings. Sincerely, James Hartwell, Esq. I read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Asset recovery, spousal support denial, public conduct restrictions. Miles wasn't just divorcing me, he was trying to destroy me. I called Theo, but for the first time since I had known him, he didn't answer. I tried again an hour later, then again that evening. Nothing. Finally, at almost midnight, he texted back, "Hey, I think I need some space to process all this. Things are getting pretty intense, and I'm not really built for this kind of drama. Take care of yourself." Just like that, my authentic connection, my emotional growth partner, my validation that I was living courageously, gone. I was completely alone with a folder full of evidence that painted me as the villain in my own love story, facing a legal battle I didn't understand against a man who apparently knew exactly what he was doing. For the first time since my wedding reception, I began to wonder if maybe, possibly, I had made a terrible mistake. But even then, sitting in my empty apartment with divorce papers and a returned wedding ring, I couldn't quite bring myself to admit that the mistake had been mine. The law office of Hartwell, Stone and Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of a downtown glass tower that seemed designed to intimidate people like me. I sat in the marble-floored waiting room, wearing my most professional outfit, trying to project confidence, while my hands shook with nervous energy. I had spent 3 days trying to find a lawyer willing to take my case. The first 2 attorneys I contacted had declined after Googling my name and finding the viral videos. The third, a young public defender named David Chen, had agreed to represent me, but warned that my options were limited. "Your husband has documentation of infidelity," he had explained during our consultation. "In this state, that affects asset division and spousal support significantly. Plus, the public nature of the incident complicates things." Now David sat beside me, reviewing his notes one final time before we faced Miles and his legal team. "Remember," he whispered, "let me do the talking. Don't volunteer information, don't get defensive, and whatever you do, don't mention social media or authenticity or emotional growth." The receptionist called our names, and we were led into a conference room where Miles sat with 2 attorneys who looked like they charged more per hour than I made in a month. Miles had lost weight since I'd last seen him, but he looked focused and determined in a way that made my chest tight with anxiety. "Ms. Chessel," said the older attorney, James Hartwell, "thank you for coming. I trust you've had time to review our preliminary documentation." "We've reviewed your materials," David replied carefully. "My client disputes several of your characterizations." Hartwell smiled in a way that suggested he had been hoping for exactly that response. He opened a thick binder and began laying out photographs, text message printouts, and bank statements across the conference table like he was dealing cards. "Let's start with the timeline," he said. "February 15th, first documented contact between Ms. Chessel and Theodore Morel. Coffee at Café Luna, paid for with the joint credit card she shared with our client." He placed a receipt on the table. "February 22nd, second meeting, this time at the Morrison Gallery. Security cameras captured this image of physical contact. A photograph of Theo's hand on my back as we looked at a painting. March 8th, purchase of new clothing from Bella Boutique, totaling $347. Text message to Mr. Morel that same evening. Can't wait for you to see what I picked out. Another receipt, another text message printout. March 15th, first documented kiss, witnessed by Margaret Chessel and photographed by a gallery patron who didn't realize the significance at the time. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Theo and I, standing close together outside the gallery, his lips pressed to mine. April the 2nd through April 20th, 17 separate meetings, documented through credit card records, phone location data, and witness statements. The evidence kept coming. David tried to object to some of it, arguing privacy violations and irrelevance, but Hartwell had clearly done his homework. Everything was legally obtained, properly documented, and devastatingly comprehensive. And finally, Hartwell said, reaching for a laptop, "We have the wedding reception incident itself." He played the video of my toast, the one that had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times across various social media platforms. Watching it in that sterile conference room, surrounded by lawyers and legal documents, it looked even worse than I remembered. "I think we can all agree," Hartwell continued, "that this represents a clear pattern of infidelity, deception, and public humiliation of our client." "Your client knew about the friendship," David said weakly. "There was no deception." "Friendship?" Hartwell raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Chessel, did you know your wife was kissing her friend at gallery openings?" Miles spoke for the first time since we'd entered the room. "No." "Did you know she was buying lingerie and perfume for her meetings with this friend?" "No." "Did you know she was planning to announce her feelings for this friend at your wedding reception?" "No." Each no hit me like a physical blow. Laid out like this, my behavior looked calculated and cruel, rather than spontaneous and authentic. "Here's what we're prepared to offer," Hartwell said, sliding a document across the table. "Ms. Chessel keeps her personal belongings and her car. Mr. Chessel retains the apartment, all joint savings and investments, and his retirement accounts. No spousal support. In exchange, we'll file for irreconcilable differences rather than adultery." I looked at the settlement offer and felt the blood drain from my face. It was everything. Miles was taking everything we had built together and leaving me with almost nothing. "This is punitive," David protested. "My client contributed to this marriage financially and emotionally. She deserves equitable distribution." "Your client committed adultery and then humiliated our client in front of 200 people," Hartwell replied calmly. "In this state, that affects distribution significantly. We think this offer is more than generous." "I need time to consider," I said, speaking for the first time. "Of course," Hartwell said. "You have 48 hours. After that, we file for adultery-based divorce and seek full asset recovery, plus damages for emotional distress and reputational harm." As we left the building, David tried to prepare me for reality. "Evadne, they have you dead to rights," he said as we stood on the sidewalk. "The evidence is overwhelming, and the public nature of everything makes it worse. If this goes to trial, you'll lose everything, and probably end up owing him money." "How is that possible? We were married for 4 hours." "You were together for 3 years. You shared assets, made joint purchases, built a life together. Then you cheated and humiliated him publicly. The court isn't going to be sympathetic." I went home to an apartment that might not be mine for much longer and tried to figure out what had happened to my life. 6 weeks ago, I had been a successful event planner, engaged to a loving man with a bright future ahead of me. Now I was a viral villain, facing financial ruin and social exile. My phone had been buzzing all day with notifications I was afraid to check. When I finally opened social media, I found that someone had leaked details from the divorce proceedings. The hashtag #authentic Evadne was trending again, but not in a good way. Update: Wedding toast lady is getting destroyed in divorce court. Husband has receipts for everything. Plot twist: authentic Evadne might end up homeless after divorce. Karma is real, y'all. Breaking: Miles Chessel's legal team releases statement. Wedding humiliation was culmination of months of deception and infidelity. I tried calling Simone, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried my mother, but she said she couldn't talk because people are watching the house now. I even tried calling Peterson Events to see if I still had a job, but Jennifer told me that Sandra thought it was best if I took an extended leave of absence. In desperation, I called Theo. "Jesus, Evadne," he said when he finally answered. "Do you know that reporters have been calling me? They found my studio. They're asking about our relationship." "What did you tell them?" "I told them we were friends who got coffee sometimes. What did you expect me to say? The truth, that we had a connection, that what we shared was real and meaningful, and—" "Evadne, stop. What we shared were some conversations and a couple of kisses. You turned it into this whole dramatic thing, and now it's destroying your life. I can't be part of that. So you're abandoning me too? I'm protecting myself. You should try it sometime." He hung up, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my authentic life. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the divorce settlement offer spread out in front of me. 48 hours to decide whether to accept financial ruin or fight for something worse. I thought about the evidence file Miles had compiled, the methodical way he had documented every moment of my relationship with Theo. While I had been posting about emotional courage and authentic living, he had been building a legal case that would destroy me. For the first time since my wedding reception, I began to understand that Miles wasn't the traditional, emotionally stunted man I had convinced myself he was. He was strategic, patient, and apparently much smarter than I had given him credit for. He had let me hang myself with my own authenticity, and now he was presenting me with the rope. I signed the settlement papers on a grey Thursday morning that felt like the end of the world. David had advised me that fighting would only make things worse, and after seeing the mountain of evidence against me, I knew he was right. "You're making the smart choice," he said, as I scrawled my signature across document after document. "This way, you walk away with something instead of nothing." But something felt like a cruel joke. My car, my personal belongings, and enough money from our joint account to cover first month's rent and deposit on a studio apartment across town. Everything else, our beautiful apartment, our savings, our investments, the life we had built together, stayed with Miles. The worst part was the non-disclosure agreement. I was legally prohibited from discussing the divorce publicly, posting about it on social media, or giving interviews about what had happened. My authentic voice, the one I had fought so hard to find, was being legally silenced. "What if people ask me questions?" I had asked David. "You refer them to your attorney and say nothing else. Violating this NDA could cost you everything you have left." As I walked out of the law office for the final time, I felt like a ghost of myself. The confident, empowered woman who had stood up at her wedding reception to speak her truth had been replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone who had lost everything in pursuit of authenticity. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Oliver. Miles asked me to let you know that you have until Sunday to remove your belongings from the apartment. After that, anything left will be donated." 3 days to pack up 3 years of my life. I spent Friday in a haze, throwing clothes and books into boxes, while trying not to look at the wedding photos still hanging on our walls. Miles had left them up, and I couldn't decide if that was cruelty or indifference. Saturday brought an unexpected visitor. I opened the door to find Margaret, Miles's mother, standing in the hallway with an expression I couldn't read. "Margaret," I said, surprised. "I didn't expect— May I come in?" I read Miles's letter 3 times, each word cutting deeper. He'd loved me completely, but I'd chosen public humiliation over private honesty. Margaret's gentle truth stung. You cared more about making a point than protecting the man you loved. Sunday, Oliver and friends arrived with a moving truck. They dismantled our shared life in hours, furniture, art, memories, erasing every trace. In my new 400-square-foot studio, I unpacked the returned wedding ring. A jeweler's note read, "Mr. Chessel returned this because the woman he married wasn't the one he fell in love with. He hopes you find her again." Theo's final text